Hello everyone, this is Mr. Campret, and today I'm doing a video about my experience with COVID-19 testing at Siloam Hospital in Yogyakarta. On 2 trips during the pandemic to Indonesia, I've used their services for a total of 3 times. 2 for a molecular isothermal, like the Abbot ID now, and 1 time for a PCR test for travel back to Europe. I made the bookings each time via their WhatsApp reservation number. The first 2 times, it was basically fill out what package you want, like what kind of test. You make a picture or a scan of your ID. And then the first 2 times, via the ATM, the money was transferred to their account. The third time it was, I inquired, hey, do I transfer the money as usual? It was like, no, you can pay at the testing location. The testing is done not in the main building, but in the parking structure, sort of behind the hospital on the top floor. They have sort of like a, shack, I would call it. Like some wooden walls that were put up with benches. And there they do the testing for their, in my case, for the rapid antigens, the isothermals, the PCRs, things like that. When you go there, take your pen, because there will be some forms to fill out again, a mask, your ID, and try to go to the toilet before you go there, because you could be waiting for quite a while. And I didn't see any toilet facilities. So they might be there, but they might not be there. Once you go there, you fill out some forms. Now, the first 2 times, they had my ID there already printed out. And they knew that I was coming. I was on the list. The third time, my details were not there, that I was coming. There was no printout of my ID, things like that. So it wasn't a problem, because I took my ID with me and they just photocopied it over there. But it looks like maybe now you can also just walk in and just do the test. Like the first 2 times, it was really like, we have limited slots. And the last time, which is this time on the 27th of May, it was really quiet. Now you fill out the forms and then you sit down. Now sitting down, that varied up to now from half an hour waiting last time to considerably more than an hour for my PCR test. So be prepared for that. Once you're about to get tested, your name gets called. You get like a sticker with your name on it and your details, and you go to where you get swabbed. You give them the little sticker, and they ask you to confirm that is really you, because it's your name and your details on it. If that's all correct, then they swab you. The swab goes into, like this tube, and the sticker goes on it, and you can go away. The result will be sent to your email, so make sure that you correctly and clearly fill out your email address so that the email with the results will get to you. This is how the result looks in Indonesian, both for the molecular isothermal in this case, but also for the PCR test. It just changes then that instead of molecular isothermal, it will say RT-PCR. But in essence, this is the layout. This goes to your email. You can print it out for travel or for other uses you might have for it in Indonesia. They can get it to you in English if you want to. During my second test, I did the PCR, and I needed it in English because I was leaving Indonesia and transiting in Singapore and entering the Netherlands. And for that, I needed an English result on my PCR test. So I went there. When I filled out the form, like when I booked, I said, hey, I'm going to need an English, I'm going to need the result in English. When I went to the location, I said, hey, I need it in English. And I even took like the post-it notes, put them on and said, hasil bahasa bahasa Inggris. So to show them, like, hey, I need the result in English. So when I went away, I got the email, and what do you guess? It was in Indonesian language. I immediately WhatsApped them and explained, like, hey, I really need this in English. And they messaged back, like, okay, we're having some problems with the computer. Give us some time. Now, luckily, I was already looking at getting it translated. But in the hour, I got this one, which is, the RT-PCR swab test in English. And this was good enough to check in Jakarta, transit Singapore, and enter the Netherlands with no problems. But this shows you, be prepared that, if something happens, that you have enough time to solve it and contact them to do things like that. Now, this one is very easy. There's, you'll just need it for international travel, and it will work just fine for most countries. Like I said, the molecular isothermal I did just for myself when I was exiting quarantine. Quarantine, like the first time I did the 14 days home quarantine, I came in just in time before they required you to stay at the quarantine hotels. So I did 14 days. Before I entered Indonesia, I had a PCR test. When I exited, in the morning, I went to get tested. And then when I got the result, and that's why I took the isothermal test, is because you have the result in, let's say, half an hour. So it makes it a bit more practical, because when I have to go all the way to the city. So that way I can get swabbed, get the result, and still do something in the city after I get the result and I finish quarantine. Otherwise, I would have to go back to the kampung and wait a couple of hours to get the result of a PCR test. Plus, the isothermal test is also significantly cheaper. At the moment, these are 850,000 for the PCR test. With the fast turnaround time of 6 hours, you're paying at the moment 1,750,000 rupiah. So that is a big difference. So that's why I also went for the isothermal, because they were not really required, but just to show, I've done the quarantine, I tested negative, now I'm stopping quarantining, and I'll send the result to the Kepala Kampung. Also at the place, you get when you do the test, you also get a receipt. For the PCR test, I always take the receipt with me, because the PCR test will be checked at several locations, like for the flight domestically, but also checking in, and arrival in the Netherlands, it was also checked. So if there's any question like, hey, what is this? Is this, did you just make this up yourself? I try to have some supporting documentation, things to prove that, no, you really did the test. And that can be things like the receipt you get, like this. This is the receipt for the isothermal test. Or things like the transfer. When you make the transfer via the ATM to their account, you might have that pay slip. Or if you pay by credit card at the location, you will, of course, have a credit card receipt. So for me, I always take those. They've never been asked, but just to be sure that if, along the line, someone's going to go like, hey, this looks a bit dodgy, that I have some supporting documents to show that this is, a real test done by a real clinic for which I paid. So this is a little bit of a, rambling YouTube video. My apologies for that. This is take 15 or something, because I still cannot edit. and I'll just leave it in with all fault, mistakes, and all the way.